Hi, everybody. Hopefully everyone can hear me okay. We are launching the first of our webinar series here today. We have George Greene from Stony Brook University, who's going to talk about transitioning from S&C coach into a leadership role. So great, obviously, to have George with us today. There'll be an opportunity during today to ask questions. George will let us know if he'd prefer those to wait until the end, or whether he's happy to kind of take those as a go. There's an option. You should have an option on your screen that you can write in the Q&A or raise a hand. So George will fill us in on his preference there. Just a quick word for our generous sponsors who've enabled this event to take part for free for the S&C community. SAM Probiotics, Output, which is a sports technology device, and also Team Builder, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. So I'll hand over to George now and let him kick off his presentation, and I hope you all enjoy the event.
Thank you so much, Andrew. I'm going to share my screen. Let's see. And as Andrew alluded to, if anybody has questions, I have absolutely no issue with those coming throughout the course of this presentation. So if you have one, obviously feel free to put it in the text box and I'll answer that. Today, I'm going to talk about really my transition or the evolution of my position from more of a traditional strength conditioning coach, overseeing a strength conditioning department, to a member of the athletic director's senior staff, and also go into staff development and some of the things I think are important for really establishing yourself and getting the process started for expanding outside of the walls of your weight room. But I'm excited to do this presentation today. And as I stated, please, I'm open to any questions and I'm willing to share anything that you guys have. I'm going to really share a lot of the challenges that I think our field faces and some of the challenges I face personally, and be as open and transparent about this process as possible. Quickly, I want to say thank you to the IUSCA, Andrew Langford. I think what they're doing is unbelievable. Everything from the resources they're providing to the audits they're doing, the external audits, which I think are what our field needs to continue to drive forward. And I really appreciate the opportunity to speak today. I want to thank my current and former staff. Without them, I wouldn't be able to do the job I do right now. And they really, are everything. They're the foundation for everything that we do. The student athletes, I've worked with some amazing student athletes, and pictured here, Jerron Cornish, a former basketball player I worked with at Stony Brook. They're the reason I get up every day and come to work with passion and energy, and I love the job I do. And then my wife and son, really first and foremost, I should thank them for allowing me to do the job I love. And I will apologize in advance. My 10-month-old makes any noise upstairs. He's learning how to walk a little bit, and he's fallen quite a bit. So, but I really appreciate them. Just some of my mentors, people I've worked for directly. My current AD, Sean Hilbrun, who's is an awesome leader and mentor, and someone that allows me to do my job at the highest level. Bob Otrando, who's the former director at UMass Amherst, he really gave me my first full-time job and challenged me and pushed me to learn, and I learned a ton from him. Mary Kate Fight, who was she was actually my college strength coach, and then she gave me my first internship at the University of Iowa. Just an amazing person and coach. Ken Tyler, who was the director of athletics at the University of Mary Washington, who hired me for my first head strength conditioning position. And then Dr. Brian Thompson, who was my college advisor, and someone, obviously a lot of people in this field know Dr. Thompson because of his work at Springfield College and the people that he's really helped to get opportunities and helped to mentor in his work. Throughout the course of this presentation, there's three people who I've never worked for directly, and I've had limited interaction with, but their work I think is outstanding, and I want to reference them and thank them on here. Bob Alejo, who really, what he does for the profession and highlighting the role of a strength coach. A lot of the things you're going to hear me talk about today I've heard from him first, and really it's motivated me to get to the position I'm in. Ron McKeefery, who wrote CEO Strength Coach and has put out a lot of information related to time management and organization strategies. A lot of things I pull from him from the structure of organizing my staff. And then Tina Murray, who is, if you've read any of her work on the performance code and how she structures and evaluates her staff. These are three people I've really utilized in terms of resources and really mentors from afar. Just to go through a little bit about my background, I did my undergrad degree at Springfield College in applied exercise science. I completed my master's in health and human performance from Fort Hays State University, and I'm currently in the process of doing my doctorate in sport and performance psychology from the University of Western States. Really love to learn. I love all aspects of the performance field, and this doctorate in sports psychology has really helped me think outside the box as a leader. I started my career at the University of Iowa as an intern. From Iowa, I went back home to New York and took a position at a private facility at Athletic Republic, which is really my first full-time job. From there, I went to UMass Amherst, where I spent about 4 years. The first bit as a paid intern, the second bit as an assistant director. Really got my teeth wet, my feet wet in strength and conditioning at UMass, and got to work with a lot of different sports. From UMass, I had a stint as a tactical strength and conditioning specialist for the U.S. Special Operations Command down at Fort Bragg in North Carolina. From there, I went to the University of Mary Washington and became the first full-time strength coach in school history at a Division III school down in Virginia. And really, that's where I learned how to be a great communicator. My leadership skills really improved significantly with all the demands that job places on you, whether it's meeting with various different sport coaches or designing a weight room and hiring interns and staff. I really had to be creative there. And, for any folks on here, maybe young strength coaches who, I think there's sometimes a misconception that the Division III level is it's not the same as Division I, and obviously there's differences, but that role really helped shape me for the position I'm in now as a Division I leader of a strength and conditioning department. So at Stony Brook University. So I think that job really helped prepare me for the rigors of what I faced in the first couple of years at Stony Brook. And just to get started here, you want to go through why do strength coaches make good leaders outside of the weight room? And I think really there's a lot of different reasons, but these are the ones I think that I would like to highlight that have really stood out to me. Number one is confidence leading teams and athletes. That transfers into other areas. Public speaking, getting in front of groups. Strength coaches are in a unique position where they're presenting to maybe 30 or 40 athletes an overview on their program. And then that program and that training session needs to be organized and detailed in order for it to be successful. And as you grow as a leader, you realize that those things really carry into other areas, whether that's, presenting about your department and maybe some changes and updates that need to be done, or presenting to a senior staff or a donor about some technology or some equipment that you'd like to purchase. The confidence that you gain leading training sessions really does transfer into other areas. The second piece is experience communicating with head coaches, assistants, support staff members, and as well as the student athletes. Again, it's a unique position as a strength coach where you're really crossing over into so many other people's domains, but also really different personalities, different backgrounds, different cultures with multiple sports and multiple coaches. Again, that really does transfer over into a leadership position. Next thing is relatability to support units as well as sport coaches. We are in a unique position where we are both. You're a coach, you are motivating, you are pushing athletes, you are working closely with the student athletes, but you're also a support staff member. You're a cog in the wheel that helps the whole thing roll. So you can relate to all those other units that are in the support staff situation, but you could also relate to sport coaches and some of the challenges they face. So again, that's another factor that I think is important. And then ground level contact with athletes. We're really the only unit that works with every single athlete in most cases in the department. Your high risk academic kids, you have many athletes obviously who see the academic staff, but there are probably some athletes who are very good in school who maybe don't go in there every day. Same thing with injured athletes. They're athletes that, need treatment, need rehab, are going to go in there. The athletic trainers are obviously a huge, important part of the process. But the intimate one-on-one or team interactions are less than what you would see from a strength and conditioning coach in the traditional setting, especially at the college level. So I think the day-to-day interaction, really getting a pulse on the team, knowing the players, I think really is important for someone that might be in a leadership position as part of an administration. And then management in multiple disciplines. I've heard multiple people say this, Bob Alejo, I've heard Ron McKeefery say this. You really wear a lot of hats as the strength coach. And 10 years ago, it was probably more hats. Now there's a lot more specialties within an athletic department. But athletes trust you. So they come to you with nutrition advice, and you might point them in the right direction as the nutritionist, but you're a lot of times the point of contact for many different areas that impact the student athletes, which again transfers over into a leadership role where you might oversee different units or different specialties. So being able to put people in the right position for success in leadership roles, I think is another transferable trait. And then attention to detail and organizational skills. I'm biased because of my background, but I believe strength coaches are some of the most organized and detailed people in any organization. And that certainly does transfer really into any field, especially in an athletic department. Then the next one is, why is it important for strength coaches to be in leadership positions? I think first and foremost, to be an advocate for the growth of your department and your staff. Being a part of the athletic director, senior staff, and being a part of meetings where, right now we're in, it's a COVID situation. Everybody's going through a challenging time. How do you advocate that your hiring process, your unfilled positions are more important or as important as maybe some other positions that are open? And being in a leadership position at that level allows you to advocate and say, okay, you know what, this is a really important role. This is the amount of student athletes that this position impacts. This is a really incredibly stressful time for the strength and conditioning unit as they go into the summer, where training is enhanced with all the teams that we have back here in the summer. So I think as a strength coach in a leadership position, being able to advocate for your staff is probably the most important bullet that I'll talk through today. The second one, it's a place for senior coaches to advance as they get older. I think I love coaching, and I'll go through a little bit about the specifics of my role here. But I'm still on the floor. I do still coach. But I think as coaches get older, as they advance, having more strength coaches in leadership roles will be able to have, and I'll talk through this later too, proper evaluations in place. It will have really an advisor on the athletic director's leadership council that can provide information about what a good strength coach looks like, about what needs there really are. So I think as the field progresses, the more people get into these roles, it's a place for people to advance to, when you're in your 50s and maybe you don't have the same energy and the same vigor you did to be coaching on the floor for 10 or 12 hours a day, but you could really coach other coaches, which is extremely rewarding and something I really love. And then more people educating senior leaders about our roles. I think there's misconceptions. There's really a lack of understanding that really can be explained by somebody who has done the job at a high level for a long time. And then protecting yourself and your staff. I think, a lot of times it's the information that a senior staff, an administrator, or an AD might hear could be directly from a head coach or from somebody that has a problem with the way a person is running their strength and conditioning program. And oftentimes it's unfair, maybe not all the time, but sometimes it might be an unfair evaluation of that person. And being there and being able to describe what the person does and what their role is, I think, really important for a strength coach. And then proper evaluations, which I'll talk through a bit here in this presentation, but I think there's a misconception about how to evaluate strength coaches. And really, there's a lack of understanding about how to evaluate strength coaches, but a seasoned veteran in the field is the best suited person to evaluate what a good strength and conditioning coach looks like. And then really, why aren't more people in these positions? I think if you look around the country, there isn't a ton. And I think as the field evolves, I think we will see more and more. I think part of that is the strength and conditioning profession is a relatively new one. And the history is relatively short. But I also think there's some other factors here that, are maybe a little bit inside of our control that we can work towards. The one is, and I've mentioned this in the last slide, but lack of understanding from our supervisors about what we do and our impact. So I think it's critical to describe what we do, to educate our supervisors in order to drive the profession forward. The second one is uncertainty on how to get there, right? Like there may be many people who want to do this job, myself included, as I've grown over time. I'm fortunate to be in this position, but I knew this is what I wanted to do. I really had no idea how to get there. So I think the uncertainty piece is a real thing. Lack of professionalism. I do think that there are times where you see things about our field and how people act and things like that put a bad taste in people's mouth about what strength coaches do, and I think it creates misconceptions. So I think some of that is on us, and I think as leaders of departments or assistant strength coaches or really anybody in the field, I think, really, I think just wherever, if you're attending a meeting, if you're going to meet with administrators, if you're going to go present information, look at it like you're on an interview and treat that conversation like you're on an interview. Dress, maybe not a suit and tie, but put a polo and slacks on if you're leaving the weight room to go have a conversation. I think that will paint a better picture of who we are as professionals outside the weight room walls. And then in some cases, it's the inability to meet administration where they are. I think, and I'll talk through this in greater detail, but providing data and information that they can understand and relate to, whether it's how we've been resourceful, how you've saved money, how you've lowered injury rates. Those are things that really administrators can relate to. And so you really got to piece together your data that makes sense to them. And that leads into my next slide here, and it's how to show value to administration or administrators. And I think the first one that I've found to be incredibly valuable is build relationships and connections with faculty and staff on campus and think outside the box. Most universities really do value collaboration. A president's office will value the fact that an athletic department is working closely with dining services, is working closely with health science or strength and conditioning departments as part of campus. People really like that. So in your position, if you can, one, enhance relationships, it'll probably enhance your program, but two, those relationships will make your athletic administration be seen positively in the light of those on campus. So I think being able to expand outside of the weight room walls and work with other people on special projects has been a helpful and really strong resource for me. And I'll share just a couple stories and information. So the top picture there you see is our athletes eating at our we call it our Wolves Den training table. And that's a relationship that was built with our campus dining program where they were able to bring a satellite training table or a satellite dining hall into our athletics facility. And to no additional cost to us, we had a full service training table designed specifically to meet the needs of athletes that any athlete on campus can utilize, or any student and athletes can utilize, but it was in our building. We held it in non-COVID times. Obviously, this will be back in play next year, but in the last year prior to COVID, we had it in the evenings. It was dinner every day. And it was a really awesome experience. We had staff eating downstairs. We had coaches eating downstairs. We had athletes eating in our building. And we worked with the nutrition team on campus with our nutrition staff. So it was a really awesome collaborative project that involved a lot of people that utilized resources and things that didn't really cost us a ton of money. So I think those things are really important. The bottom picture, my second year here, we worked with a computer science group on campus on a project. It was called Wolfie Metrics. 2 students and a faculty member had a course that was aimed at making the jobs of folks on campus easier. And I had seen a posting for it, and I reached out to the professor. We established a relationship. It was a year-long project that they won awards for, that ultimately, again, shed a positive light on the athletic department for working collaboratively with another group on campus. And the professor in the photo here, Professor Scarlatos, I don't think he was a person that spent a lot of time in the building. I don't think he went to a lot of games, but he felt a connection to our campus because of this project, or excuse me, a connection to our department because of this project, which enhanced relationships. So I think those things are very important and probably underrated, but I think can really help shed light on your value as a leader. Collaborations internally and externally, right? I mentioned the collaborations off campus internally with your sports medicine department, with your academic department, with your media relations department, anything that you can do to help them or work together on, I think really does show value. The next one is sharing data they can relate to. I have a couple slides upcoming that I believe will paint a better picture for you, but I utilize a year in review every year with our administration. I sit down with my AD and I go through bullets on how we've spent our budget and what pieces of equipment, technology, or resources we've provided to student athletes, and ultimately what that impact has been. That way he understands that we're doing everything we can to be cognizant of how we spend, but also how that impacts the athletes directly. And, resourcefulness is another piece to this. I think obviously spending money and things of that nature, there's a balance on, being smart, but also advocating for things that you need long-term. But we have a fueling station as an example that we have completely managed by student interns who need class credit. We don't pay $1 for student staff. That's resourcefulness that an administration looks at as a positive. And then lastly, the way to show value, especially early on when you get a job, is feedback from coaches and athletes, right? Sometimes that might be the first impression that allows you to get your foot in the door to step into a further leadership position. So the feedback from coaches and athletes is important. And some of that, again, is completely out of your control, but being a great teammate, going the extra mile and working, to establish really good interpersonal relationships will help you show value to administration, because oftentimes the head coach has the ear of the administrators quicker than you will, or at least especially initially. And this is an example year in review, as I shared earlier. And again, I try and keep things very short and simple and share information that they can relate to. And we started a fueling station in 2017. So in 2017, 2018, this is what I happened to share after our first year and some things that we did differently. So I showed the difference in usage from 17, 18 from the previous year, and how that increase, shows the value and the demand for having this operation. I shared some exit survey data that showed athletes wanted fresh fruit, such a simple thing, but being able to meet the needs of the student athletes is obviously important for us. We added Jamba Juice smoothies every Friday. Utilize a relationship with the health science department, as I mentioned earlier, to obtain 10 interns to expand our hours of operation. So we were open originally from 10 to 4. We bumped that to 8 to 4. We said 10,000 under budget with strict inventory and trade agreements through Van Wagner. And then our goals for 18, 19 at the time was to expand our menu to include meal replacements items, which led into this training table opportunity. So I think a couple bullets, not being too wordy, but having the information that shows, hey, this is something we added. This is what the return was in our investment. And here's what the athletes are saying and what they'd like to see in the future. A second and another example is an injury data report. Prior to these bullets here, this is information related to our basketball program. We had a donation given that allowed us to fund additional training table for our men's and women's basketball programs. And we also purchased a force plate. And in order to show that the return on that investment, I look back at some of our injury data and utilized, everybody's probably seen this through the NBA or Major League Baseball, how you calculate man games, just some very basic bullets that showed we were stronger, we were healthier, and we had our key players playing in a lot of games, which resulted in 2 straight 20-year seasons. Now, a lot of other factors at play outside of the training table edition, the force plate edition, and things that might impact injuries from occurring. But just to show, hey, we added these things, and we can't necessarily say 100% that they had a direct correlation, but our team is getting better. We're making improvements. And I also did share some strength statistics and things of that nature. But again, these are things that as an AD, it's 4 bullets. They understand numbers, they understand data that, really show that the investments they are making are worthwhile. And then my next slide is just an administration overview. And then I'm going to share a little bit about my path and how I ended up in this position. So, and I did some research on this, and across the country, the most common positions you see that are part of a senior staff are an internal ops person, which someone that does championships, does travel, does a number of different things within the department. your financial person, who's your CFO, your chief financial officer, who manages the budget, who manages a lot of the operations about spending and budgeting and things like that. Then you have your development folks, as well as your compliance, as well as a senior women's administrator. So a lot of these people sit on the senior staff at most institutions, and those are the people that are ultimately the decision makers alongside the AD. At Stony Brook, these were the administrative groups, at least when I first got to Stony Brook, that existed. There was a management team, which really consisted of the leaders of each of the departments on campus, so or in athletics. So the leader for tickets, the leader for academics, the leader for sports medicine, really the middle managers essentially make up the management team. The executive team was really an extension of that, with a few less that were part of senior staff that had been elevated, and then the leadership council, which is the 5 people on the AD's senior staff. And just to paint a picture a little bit on my background, when I was hired 5 years ago, I was not a part of any of these groups and did not know they existed. I had no clue. And, so for me, I knew I wanted to do a little bit more outside the weight room. I like the leadership piece. I like, I like being involved in the growth of the department. And in my second year, the deputy AD approached me and asked if I had any interest in doing anything outside the weight room. And right place, right time. There were a couple positions that were left unfilled within administration because there was a hiring freeze, and I was added to the management team, right? So that first that first group there of 15 people, and I really took it serious. If I'm being honest with you, like I'd go dressed up. I'd have bullets. It really was report outs in that meeting, and they happened either monthly or biweekly, depending on the time of year. And the AD would often spark a conversation and would say, "Hey, I'm seeing this, this, and this. Does anybody have any thoughts?" And I would just always speak up, and I didn't wasn't doing it on purpose, or I wasn't, there was no intent other than I wanted to be involved in the conversation. And so I had the opportunity in being in that meeting to expand upon the things that we were doing. And it was early in my tenure here. And so we were adding things like nutrition. We were adding things like pieces of technology that we didn't have prior. So it was a great opportunity to talk through some of those things. And it allowed me to show the senior staff I was, able to articulate myself in a way and share information in a leadership role that would transfer over into some of these other areas. A year or so later, the AD asked me to be a part of the executive team. And about 3 years ago, or 2.5 years ago, he put me on his leadership council, which is the 5 senior members of his department. And that's a meeting a group that meets twice a week. It's everything from budget to hiring coaches to a number of different things, in addition to just some general report outs. But I think that growth was, it was really educational for me to see the different levels within an organization. And maybe every school does this differently. I'm only sharing what we do here. But I learned a lot in that time about how people perceive maybe strength and conditioning, and how I was able to really educate those around us, around the table, about what we're trying to accomplish. I think was really helpful. So that's just a general overview on my path and how I ended up there. And I think it doesn't hurt to ask. And I think being, articulating yourself and explaining what your goals are, I think are important. And in hindsight, I'm really glad he came up to me and asked me, but I probably should have mentioned what my goals were long-term as well. So I'm thankful that his name was Rob Emmerich. He came to me and asked me that question. That got it going in the right direction. And then really, when's the right time? And I think, many of you who are listening to this, is all the things that you do as a strength coach, it's really hard to think about really doing anything else. And I think so this part of it is really important. And in year one, I would not have been able to do what I do currently. And I think in order to show value to the department and expand outside the weight room, you've really got to make sure your house is in order and you have systems in place. And you got to make the main thing the main thing. And if your strength and conditioning department has holes to fill, you've got staff to hire, you've got other things, you could still work towards this. But I think having a great foundation in place is what's going to allow you to step out and lead in other areas. And really for us, and I just highlight this here, culture in our department, and this is a testament to my staff. Any athlete in any sport can walk up to any coach in our staff and get the same level of coaching and support as if it were the lead for that team. And being able to have great people who interact well with student athletes, who interact well with head coaches, will allow you to do some things outside of the facility that you might otherwise not be able to do. In my current staff, we actually have 2 positions that we're going to fill this summer. So we have, right now, there's 5 of us plus myself, Vinny Cagliostro, Kate Newell, Joe Quattrone, Kristen Cole, and Alex Wheat. They're awesome. They do a phenomenal job. They are great leaders. They push me. And in the last 5 years, the list underneath are people who have been a part of our staff. GC Area, who's now the top assistant at Illinois. Pat Cummings, who's the director at a great high school down in Florida, Buckles High School. Kelly Cosgrove, who's the director of Olympic sports at Murray State. Joelle Lynch, who's the head strength coach at Manhattanville College. Mark Ellis, who's the lead for men's lacrosse at Princeton. Rob Deese, who's now with Rutgers football as a sports science coordinator. Jasmine Johnson is now the assistant director at Colgate University. These were people who are GAs, assistants, so on and so forth, working within our department. So I've got great people here now. I've had great people here in years past, and I highlight that to show those people were doing such a great job. It allowed me to do some things that were outside the room. And, that's a testament to their work. But I think first and foremost, get a great group together, have a plan, establish your team and your culture. And then I think you can step outside a little bit more and do some different things. So as I kind of go through this and transition now, I'm going to talk about hiring and development of your staff. As I mentioned, it's so critical for those people to be leaders within your department, for you ultimately to be a leader with a role that's a little bit more broad-based. So I think first and foremost, know your situation, right? I think, do you have GAs? Do you have full-time people? What are the salaries? Is your cost of living high? I think you've got to get the best people, and you've got to do fair and sound interviews. I think that's really, really important. But I also think having a grasp of who you think could be most successful in your situation will help. I've had GAs come in and that live in the area, that are from the area, that it's a little bit easier financially for them to manage. I've had others come from out of state who will live in the dorms on campus to save money and do some different things that way. So I don't think you necessarily have to be dead set on hiring for certain positions based on the area you're in. But I do think it helps to have a pretty clear understanding of who will have the most success for certain positions. Second one is hire great people, and I have that underlined, who are passionate and driven to become successful in this field. I think great people, find a way and really make everybody's job more fun. To be honest with you, I think when you have great people around you, the atmosphere is better, the energy is better. And then passion is critical. This field can wear on you, and it's sometimes a long road, and you're working through challenges. So people who are passionate, again, look at those challenges as learning opportunities and keep forward momentum. And I think that's important. The next one here is look for different skill sets, personality traits, and backgrounds that can diversify your team. I think every person on my staff does something, at least 1 or 2 things that are significantly better than I can. Whether that's in a specific strength and conditioning role, like speed or conditioning, someone really has dived deep into that, or just how they communicate and how they lead. I think having different people with different backgrounds is awesome, whether that's sport experience as a coach or athletic playing experience. I think when I look at my staff, I want everybody to have a completely different background when they're a part of our staff. And then provide pathways for internal promotions when they're appropriate. I think there's a time and place for it. I think there's a time where you need to look outside, and I think there's also a time to hire internally. And I think everybody has their own individual situation that can cause there to be a push for one way or the other. But I do think having the opportunity for a great GA after 2 years to step into a entry-level assistant position could be a great way to keep continuity within your department and have someone elevate over time. And then lastly is set them up for success. And we may do this differently. There may be other folks who do this as well. I don't title our GAs as graduate assistants. And, when I first got hired, and we have 2 of them on our staff, and when I first got hired, coaches would complain that they had GAs. They felt that they were slighted because they had a graduate assistant. And I think the term graduate assistant is more appropriate in the academic realm when you have somebody who is really like a teaching aide or, really just kind of learning the ropes. And as a college strength coach, the GAs are often with team responsibility. They're meeting with coaches. So, to me, our GAs have a pretty good stipend and they have full graduate tuition covered. If you add it all up, it's not far off from what a entry-level assistant position is. So why would I title them as graduate assistants? And since I've done that, I haven't had a single one, complain that they had a GA. And I don't know if they know that I do this, or if they, that we've also just had really great people in those positions. I think it's probably a combination, but I think that helps. So we title our GAs as assistant athletic performance coaches, and we try to title our assistants as assistant directors. And I think that really has helped us, and something I will continue to do moving forward. Next one is developing your staff. Some things I think are really valuable and important in order to put a great staff together, as well as developing them while they're currently working for you. So first is coach communication, and I don't mean communicating with coaches. I mean coaching communication. As a leader of a department, I think it's important you set a standard for what you expect communication to look like. We have, it's mandatory. All of our strength coaches meet with our athletic trainers. And we found that the folks who traveled had really great relationships with our athletic trainers when I first got here. But the ones who maybe had multiple teams and didn't have as much FaceTime interaction, weren't at practices and things of that nature, they had a little bit more of a transactional relationship. So, I established what communication should look like and how it needs to proceed. Meetings with coaches, I think sit on them early, have them sit in on yours, really make that a huge part of your process, and everything else usually falls into place. Put them in leadership positions. When I give somebody responsibility within my team, they are the leader in that area. I may step in as it relates to communication or just some global stuff, but the nutrition lead is the nutrition lead. The person who oversees our data science is leading the data science area, and to me that's really important. And I think it's sometimes hard to do. And honestly, when I first got started, especially at Mary Washington, when I first got there, I had interns, I had some people. It was hard for me to delegate. Putting people in leadership positions is going to help them grow, but it's also going to help you as a leader do what's most important for your department. Next is get them FaceTime with administration and sport coaches. I think, the more time that the administrators see their value, the more time that your coaches see their value, the more opportunity you're going to have to position them for success, whether that's raises financially because people see their value, but also help them get their next opportunity from a networking standpoint. Provide funding for continuing education. I think, it seems like one that doesn't need to be mentioned, but I've heard at some places that it's not part of the process. And to me, I think every year we have an operating budget and we allocate funds for folks to go to clinics if that's what they want to do. If they want to attend a virtual clinic like this, and it's a paid version, I think stuff like that is really critical. And as a leader, I think it's important. Next is provide networking opportunities. And really anyone in my network ultimately becomes a network of my staff. And 4 years ago, we started the Long Island Athletic Performance Clinic. And this photo in the background, there's many people who are not shown in the picture, but we started it as a way to bring together folks in the tri-state area. So Stony Brook's located in New York, about 45 minutes from the city. So Hofstra University, Iona, St. John's, St. Francis, Adelphi. We've had people from, really all those schools in representation, and each of the schools provided a presentation or representation from their school about a topic, right? So Adelphi spoke in regards to nutrition. Iona spoke in regards to speed development. St. John spoke about ACL prevention. And that's expanded. And last year during COVID, we did a virtual version, but it's, again, a great way for our staffs to all connect And over time, that could lead to these people hopefully getting more opportunities related to full-time jobs and things of that nature. Reward success with raises, bonuses, title changes, and public praise. Again, sometimes it's all of this, sometimes it's one of these. But I think as people do a great job, I think those things need to be highlighted. And there's a certain level of that should be expected of a person. But I do think when, like if I have an opportunity to speak at an athletic department meeting about some things we're working on, I'll highlight in some way, shape, or form every member of my staff. I think publicly talking about the work they're doing is critical. I think when opportunities present themselves for financial incentives or financial bumps, I think those trump everything. As we grow as a profession, I think finding ways to get our staffs paid more is critical. And again, that's important. Advise them and help them land their next opportunities. I really take a lot of pride when someone on my staff has an interview, has a job they're looking for, that they come to me. And I think sometimes people try and keep people in positions because ultimately it's hard to lose great people. I've had a number in the last, and I alluded to the roles that they've had here and the roles that they're in now. So you saw those. Go get opportunities, and there's really no greater satisfaction for me when someone lands a job that they really want and one that can help them grow. So if someone has an opportunity, I will help as much as humanly possible, help them get that job, from emailing an AD to contacting a sport coach to utilizing my network to helping them negotiate salary and things like that. To me, that's an important part of the process, and one I don't think can be overlooked. And then lastly, on the development side, and then also just setting staff up for success. And this is a mistake I made early in my career, but I call it the 50-50 rule. You have GAs or new assistants on staff, and they have multiple teams. Pair them with one team that's going to challenge them. Maybe it's a difficult sport coach to work with, or a team they never worked with before, or a large roster. And then give them a team that they'll have success with. Maybe it's a sport they played or worked with in the past, or a smaller group. I think having an opportunity to have success while also work through failures is critical. And early in my career, I made some decisions where I gave people two really difficult teams or two teams that didn't match up. And I think it really hinders a young coach's progress. So I think when you have the opportunity, use that 50-50 rule, and it's really helped me moving forward. And then the next thing I'm going to touch on here is evaluating your staff. And this is a work in progress for me and something I've been working on, and I've gotten my staff's feedback on this, and I think they really like it. It's in our field, one of the most challenging areas that I think are challenging, roadblocks we have, so to speak, is who are we evaluated by and what are we evaluated on? Because so many of the things that make up what could be determined success as a strength coach could be impacted by a number of things. So I started a pyramid that shows the different areas that we're going to use to evaluate our coaches, both objectively and subjectively, to paint a clear picture of the impact a coach can have on a team. So I broke this down into 4 categories. The first one is the largest one. It's the most objective. So it involves performance data. It involves injury rates related to non-contact or soft tissue injuries. From my perspective as a strength and conditioning coach overseeing this area, I could look at all the information extremely closely, right, to make a fair evaluation of the information that's provided to me. For example, if there's a high rate of injuries, and we look at the training program, we look at some different things. Weight room attendance will be included in that. The volume and intensity of practice and the periodization that they're using will be included in that. So other factors are taken into consideration, where I think oftentimes if you're evaluated by somebody who doesn't understand performance and kind of the holistic approach that needs to be taken, you might just see, like you just see Major League Baseball or other places, strength coach fired for injuries, when what are the other factors that might be at play? So I think taking really a 5,000-foot view and looking at it holistically, I think will make the evaluation process more effective. Second largest portion will involve a coach's communication, teamwork, and other administrative assignments. For us, working as a team is really, really important. So communication, managing your assignments, whether it's overseeing, the facility maintenance schedule, the internship program, just or minor logistics like keeping our calendar up to date for the teams you work with, or communicating and following through on tasks assigned to you. That's a large portion that ultimately is a big part of the evaluation process. And communication really, that's throughout the course of the department. That's sports medicine, that's sport coaches, that's administration. And I think, again, as I mentioned earlier, communication is critical. So I think it's also really important that it's a critical piece to your evaluation process. Communication is something that transfers into anything you do, and any position you evolve into is going to require more and more higher level communication. And then the third piece of the pyramid will involve feedback from coaches and student athletes. Again, a lot of times you'll see unfair evaluations when a sport coach simply disagrees, maybe philosophically, with what a coach is doing, or a student athlete does not like what they're doing in the weight room. Where I think the feedback is critical, especially as it relates to communication, as it relates to an understanding of what a coach is looking for in terms of style of play and all those things. I think that's really important. But if a head coach comes to me and says, I don't like what your staff member is doing, that, our athletes they're not throwing up after every session, that's not going to be part of my evaluation process. Again, someone in a different position might see that differently. So I think that's really important also. And then the last piece to this is icing on the cake. To me, winning is icing on the cake. So there was an ongoing discussion on Twitter recently. Should winning be associated with the evaluation of a strength coach? It was something along those lines. And again, it's so hard to tie winning or losing, so success or failure, back to your work in the weight room. But I do think it's the most important part of any organization, especially at the collegiate level or professional level. You've got to win. Winning is critical. So I don't think you necessarily can say winning and losing is associated with the directly quantifiable with the work you do in the weight room, but I do think it's a part of it. So for us, we place an emphasis on doing things as a team, and we share training responsibility for many of our sports. Right now, I'll mention some examples. We're down 2 staff members. We got our whole staff assisting with football in the off season right now. They have a great fall and have a chance to compete for the CAA. That everybody needs to celebrate that. So I think getting everybody to understand how important winning is critical, but quantifying your ability to quantify something related to the weight room that has made you win more games or lose more games, I think is really challenging. So this is a snapshot of what I just described, and I'm not that bad at math. I know there's a 5% in addition to it. Again, as I mentioned, that's icing at the cake. 50% of the large majority of how I think we need to look at our impact as strength coaches is the quantifiable stuff, things that you can say, okay, we got our athletes stronger. These KPIs improved that are critical to this sport. Person is a great communicator, is organized within the execution of tasks within our team. Student athletes and coaches feedback obviously is a part of that process. And then championships, again, is icing on the cake. And then last couple slides I'll get into here, and then I'll certainly open up to any questions. This is my current role as Associate AD of High Performance and Competitive Success at Stony Brook, just so I can paint a little bit of a picture about what I do currently. Again, I still do coach in addition to my responsibilities as a part of the senior staff, but I have oversight of athletic performance nutrition, applied sports science, and most recently the addition of mental performance for all student athletes. Supervise and mentor all staff. I work closely with our men's basketball, football, and I do some work with our lacrosse programs as well. Basketball, I've really been in the trenches with them since I've been here, as well as a lot of the work I do with football. Still coach and still on the floor, in addition to some of the things I'm doing. As part of my role as well, I ensure support staff meetings are taking place and confirm communication is consistent amongst all parties. So our staff, our department, each of our sport programs, they meet with their support staff, whether it's weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, depending on the time of year, which I think has really been a great addition to our department and how we've enhanced our communication. It's a process that we added in my second year here. In addition to that, we have, communication standards, which I've mentioned earlier with sports medicine, among other groups on campus. I serve as the leader of the student athlete welfare team, which consists of athletic performance, life skills, sports medicine, and academics. This is a unit my AD tasked me with a few years ago. And again, it's to ensure consistent communication and troubleshoot any issues as a unit. The competitive success piece to my title, the AD, had added that on a couple of years back, and really in that role, he has me on special projects aimed at improving really the competitive aspects with specific teams, with departments, with individual athletes. And that's extremely wide ranging. It might be working with coaches on, their travel schedules to ensure that, should we stay overnight instead of getting up early, should we stay overnight instead of leaving late to ensure we're getting a great night's rest? Should we, what time should we leave to, when we're flying out? So, we've utilized sleep experts and people like that within our university to help us with those things. But that's multifaceted and something that's continued to evolve and grow over time. And then lastly, our AD's mission as the AD is to positively transform the life of each student athlete. I've never been around anybody who lives that mission more. He knows every name of every student athlete in our department, everyone. You've never seen anything like it. And he's tasked me with ensuring all student athletes have access to this holistic model. And that's something I obviously take a lot of pride in, because it's something that really is very important to him. And then the last thing I'll touch on is some of the mistakes and challenges that I faced personally. And, I think these are real, and I'm happy to share these. First is not everyone thinks like you. I think strength coaches, it's kind of ingrained in you, wrong, right, or indifferent, that you've got to outwork people. You've got to grind. You've got to be the first one and the last one to leave. And I think there's a lot wrong with that in some ways, but it also helps, I think, and is the reason why a lot of us have been successful in our careers. But not everybody thinks like that. So I think you've got to look at it and take a step back and try and look through the lens of the person that you're working with. The second piece is hesitation. I think one of the challenges I have is, and this goes hand in hand with the compartmentalizing, is you go from coach to, you might lead a group at 7:30 in the morning, you drip and sweat, blowing a whistle, running around, to go into a meeting where you got to throw a dress shirt on and slacks and talk about, some higher level stuff. So I think hesitation and to really to get away from something that you feel like you're so passionate about. So I think being able to do both over time, for me, has been a great transition. It wasn't like I'm all of a sudden cold turkey. I went from, coaching teams to just being an administrator. I've kind of, I've done less coaching, but I still do a lot. And I also get a taste of what it's like to be an administrator. And then the last one really is the imposter syndrome, right? Like, do I belong here? Can I do this? And, for me, it's that's one of the biggest challenges, and something I think over time, as this field grows and people evolve into positions like this, I think that'll change. But those are some of the challenges and mistakes I've made, and I'll continue to work towards making this a big part of the profession. So my email's here. I'm on social media at Greene, with like the color with an E at the end, at Greene Strength. And I'll also open up to any questions anybody has. So, Andrew, thank you again so much for this opportunity. James, I see a question from you here. How would be best to convince an athletic director to create a supervisor evaluator position for sport performance? I think that's a great question. I think, again, I talked through a little bit about highlighting some of the valuable things that you do and sharing that with the AD. I think would be a great way to start. Showing how you've improved the performance of the athletes over time, how you've improved or reduced injury rates, or have had low injury rates with the role that you're in. But I think it's an honest conversation, and one that takes multiple discussions. The position I'm in now was certainly an evolution, and I touched on a little bit how this process occurred. But it was a number of meetings, and it was a number of meetings that didn't involve me asking directly to be in the position I'm in, but just trying to consistently show value and show forward momentum and growth, that would want him to put me in this position. And I think, I'm very fortunate. I work for a great AD who sees the value in this role, and I think his mission and vision speak to that. But I do think it's a process that does happen over time. And I think looking across the country at programs that have been successful using this as a model has also been helpful. So I hope that answers your question. The next question I have is, do you allow coaches to come and visit your department for a day? Absolutely. We have an open door policy here for sure. And, with the COVID stuff, I would just ask if anybody's in the area locally that wants to come down, shoot me an email. We'll just make sure that if there's anything that needs to be done, through our medical team, that we take care of that. I'd love to have anybody who would like to do a site visit or come spend a day, or obviously can pick up the phone, call me anytime. Any other questions that anybody has? Well, what is next on your list to accomplish at SBU? Bobby Fisk. Bobby, thanks for the question. Yeah, I know you do great stuff over at NJIT. For me, I think the next thing I'd really like to build out, and I mentioned this, I've recently been tasked to add a mental performance program here at Stony Brook. And just over time in the position I'm in as a strength coach, and I'm sure many of you feel this way, one of the probably biggest limiting factors for, I think, reaching the highest level of performance is an athlete's ability to handle stress in the athletic setting. So overcoming adversity, positive self-talk, goal setting. So creating a resource for our athletes that goes hand in hand with nutrition and sport performance and the other things that we provide, I think is the next big push for me, and goes hand in hand with the program I'm studying now. So it's great timing and a great opportunity that the AD presented to me. So that's something I'm working on right now. Next question is, how can you get more paid coaches? Again, I think that's another really good question. I think over time, so I think we have a very strong internship program. We've had, and they are members, many of them are members of my full-time staff now. So I think this probably would be the best way to describe this. So Kate Newell's on my staff right now. She's our director of Olympic sports. And she started in the summer of 2017. She was a graduate assistant at Springfield, and she had to do a summer internship. So she had some experience prior to coming, but she was a summer intern. She was awesome, and she made an impact. And so after the summer, I went to my AD and said, listen, she's made a huge impact. She's been awesome. Can we pay her hourly? And he said yes to that. And following the fall, the spring, I should say, we had a person on my staff, Pat Cummings, who I mentioned earlier, depart for the position down in Florida. And at the time, she was in this paid internship role or paid part-time assistant role. And it was a no-brainer when I went to my AD and said, listen, we have someone here. She's got her master's. She's terrific. She's made a huge impact. Let's put her in this position. But I think in some ways, getting them in a position in general, and a paid position in general, is important, but that person needs to show value, and that value needs to be seen from your administrators and your sport coaches. And Kate's one example of that. Joe Quattrone's another member of my staff who did that at a high level, where people talked highly of him. So sport coaches that Kate worked with, she worked with volleyball and women's soccer very closely. Those athletes went to their coach and said, we love Kate. I went to the AD and said, Kate's very good. And then the head coaches of those teams went to the AD and said, Kate is very good. So I think, the more people that are hearing about how well someone is doing, I think the more opportunity would present itself to have a paid member of your staff. I also, again, everybody's budget situation is different. And we're a state institution, so it isn't easy always to pay people, or people need to be full-time employees, or there's a whole bunch of challenges with that. But I've allocated money out of my budget every year to pay, we call them coaching assistants or paid interns. And, that's allowed a really, really good intern to maybe stay for one extra semester to make an impact and do those things. So hopefully that helps answer your question. But again, I think, that's a lot of people talking highly about somebody, I think is the fastest way to get somebody into a paid role. Anybody else have any questions? I'm happy to answer. Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for your time, and Andrew, thank you so much.
Thank you, George. I think everyone would join me in thanking you for your time today. I think that was really, really informative, and I think is a really important area for our profession moving forwards. I think the more S&C coaches who can start transitioning to those leadership positions, those leadership roles, the better, really. The impact on salaries and evaluating the profession and recognition and everything else. So thanks a lot, George. I hope everyone enjoyed it today. Obviously, we've got a number of webinars coming up over the next few weeks and months, and also our conference later in the year. So look forward to you all being involved with those events as well. And thanks again, George.
Thank you, Andrew.